Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Chamber 2. Today, we will continue our discussion about climate justice. Before we start, once again, let me introduce myself. My name is Aisha Yumusyafa, who will guide this chamber from the start until all the participants has finished to present their presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, before we go further, let me read the title of each paper and the presenter name. The first presenter is Ms. Efrema Ardratya Prakasita Putri. The title is Standardization of Private Aircraft, Implication of Climate Change. Second presenter is Mr. Aryesta Wibisono Anditya. The title is Green Economy for Green Victimology, Preventing Environmental Crime and Protecting Victims through Sustainable Economic Policies. Number 3, M. Zaki Ramadan Al-Rizal. The title is Legal Consideration Toward Eco-Terrorism as a New Form of the Environmental Law Crime. Number 4, Aditya Agung Pratama. The Challenge of Blue Economy in ASEAN 2023, Climate Change and Regional Security. And the last one, Ms. Nadia Nabela, the urgency of renewable energy regulation to maintain global energy security. Before we proceed to the presentation, I will remind you regarding the rules of today's presentation. Number 1, English language is mandatory for presentations, delivery, and Q&A session. The discussion process will be fully moderated by the moderator, and each participant must follow the conditions stated by the moderator. Each presenter is given a maximum of 10 minutes for presentations and 5 minutes for discussion. The presenter can come up to the podium for the presentation. Okay, without any further ado, please welcome our first presenter, Ms. Efrema Ardratya Prakasita Putri. The time is yours, Miss.
Test? Okay. Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is in good condition. Allow me to introduce myself once again. My name is Efrema Ardratya, or commonly referred, usually my friends refer me to Efrema, and I will be presenting a paper that was written by Dr. Adia Paramita Prabandari and I on the standardization of private aircraft and the implications of climate change. And so a little bit of a background of the paper, where the idea of this paper was written after seeing through research and the continuous increase of private aircraft usage and its effects on climate change. As we continuously see celebrities, CEOs, high officials using private aircraft on a daily basis, and with this increase, there seemed to be a void of regulations on private aircraft. And that is the decision on us to finally creating this title of paper. Next. Okay, so this is a little bit on what I would be discussing further in my presentation, and it is also the contents that we have written within our paper. We have divided into the introduction, the effects, the importance to set a uniform standard, and lastly, the conclusion on why it is important to create such regulations. Okay, so the background, a little bit of the idea of this paper. So as it has been known that aviation is the most carbon extensive form of travel today. It carries a great effect towards climate change, and it is at the heart of the highest form of travel contributing to greenhouse gas emissions. So earlier in 2020, with the rise of COVID, the aviation sector was heavily affected by the pandemic. So as the aviation dropped drastically, it simultaneously impacts travel behaviors on people. However, the private aviation sector has increased with the public aviation decreasing. So as the pandemic have an infectious disease, people tend to change their way of travel to using private forms of travel. So as private aircraft has increased in demand, the environmental impact of private aircraft have been largely underestimated, as research has found that private aviation contributes to the largest emissions within aviation and amongst all types of aircraft in comparison to any other aircraft. However, emissions emanating from private aircraft have yet to be formally addressed. It has been found that private aircraft emissions per passenger are much higher than commercial aircraft. Hence, as private aircraft increases, environmental concerns emitted from aviation industry has continuously grown, becoming a grave concern within the international community. Next. And with that being said, within this paper, the approach that we take is as global warming continues to worsen, the question arises on the issue on private aircraft's disproportionate high carbon emissions and its lack of regulations raises the question about what states can do to protect the environment. So as there's no international standard or laws specifically created towards private aircraft, creating a concerns towards environmental impacts and the consequences arising from it. Next. Next, please. Thank you. So within this research paper, the approach that we take is comparing national laws that has been implemented by states in the private aviation sector and further looking deeper into laws and regulation that has been implemented in the private sector and taking that and further suggesting on creating an international standard from it. Next. Okay. So, effects of aviation emissions from private aircraft. So, as we have mentioned as I've mentioned before, it has been found that private flights have been one of the leading contributors to the rising greenhouse gas emissions. And despite the small fraction of flights being conducted through private aircraft, the gas emitted from private aircrafts are disproportionately much higher in comparison to the emissions released from commercial aircraft. Per person releases a much higher gas emissions than a commercial aircraft. Next. And so the concerns of state is given the negative effects that gas emissions have towards the environment and the large amount of emission release from private aircrafts, which only carries a small amount of people, where each person releases a much higher gas emissions. And with the increase of usage of private aircraft, it has become a concern towards states, and states are beginning to realize that it is not just commercial aircraft that needs to be regulated, but also further needs to extend towards the private sector. And here, there has been few states that implemented regulations on their private aircraft, such as Argentina. Argentina has added additional tax given depending on the fuel type, where they further implemented taxes towards the emissions released, as well as the type of fuel that is used. And further, there's also Asia, where two countries have implemented a carbon tax, one of which is Singapore, where the carbon tax in Singapore is enforced towards all industrial power generated sector and producing sectors that produces greenhouse gas emissions. And further, the improvement of aircraft and operation efficiency would reduce the overall emissions where states have taken the approach of standardizing aviation emissions. Standardizing equipment may be seen through multiple practices as well, where we see the United States have also increased their aircraft efficiency standard, and also within the EU with their also implemented a regulation on the specific equipment that is used. So these are just a few examples of states implementing regulations in the private sector through different forms, where they have attempted through these regulations to minimize any carbon emissions or minimize any extra emissions that is released compared to a commercial aircraft. Next. Next.
2 minutes left.
And therefore, within this paper, we further put forward the idea on the importance of creating a uniform standard, specifically within private aircraft as well, to help reduce the gas emissions released, as we know that private aircrafts release just as much and even more gas in comparison to the commercial aircraft, where regulations are only limited towards commercial aircraft. Hence, what we propose in this paper is that the international law should also further implement a standard towards a private aircraft, where there must be a minimum standard in emissions, equipment that is used, just as we see in regulating commercial aircraft. And next. And that is it for my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation, Ms. Efrema. Yeah, we know that the private aircraft is a symbol of success, right? So everyone wants to have private aircraft. So we need spatial regulation for this issue, right? Okay, we have approximately 5 minutes for Q&A sessions. Is there any questions to Ms. Efrema about private aircraft? Yeah, Mr.
Hello, test, test. Okay, thank you to the moderator as well to Efrema for giving a great presentation. So my question concerns that one of the issues that you mentioned earlier, that the discrepancy between the carbon emission created by private aircrafts is not equal to the passenger it took compared to commercial aircraft, which per passenger could create less carbon emission. So my question is there any other way, like creating a more sustainable fuel or making a more sustainable fuel for the engine would be a better solution, so that people who still wants to travel with private aircraft could still do that without emanating carbon as much as they would today? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. And yes, to answer your question, yes, I do agree that further creating sustainable aviation fuel in respect to private sector aviation aircraft is also important. And it is one of the solutions that I have proposed in my paper, as a few states have also begun to implement such regulations within their private aircraft sector. As yes, however, the concern on sustainable aviation fuel is the fact that there is lack of research at the moment right now, and the lack of demand within that field. As there's lack of research, there's no demand, they can't really do anything to further increase their research on sustainable aviation fuel. Hence, the concern that we have now is how can state implement further regulation on that to force aircraft to change their equipment and fuel to be much more sustainable. That's my answer.
Okay. Is enough? Okay. Thank you so much, Ms. Efrema. I think the time is up for Ms. Efrema. Give applause to her. Now we move to the second presenter, Mr. Ariesta Wibisono Anditya. Mr. Ariesta, the time is yours.
Okay, good morning everyone. I hope you're in a good condition. Please do not get bored. I'm here twice, and today, okay, today I want to deliver about green economy and green victimology. There are two methods to approach such things like everything you will be delivering this morning or everything that had been delivered yesterday about environmental and such. Okay, let's get to the next slide. Yep. I want to make sure the scope of this, what is it? The scope of this discipline is about approach, about methods to fight what we call green crimes. Okay, exceeded gas and then the waste, the improper treatment of a waste is sometimes called green crimes. At least the common view of that conduct is crimes. The topic will discuss how to deal with environmental issues, crimes, victims, and probable solutions which beneficial to every actor economically. Okay. Yep. To make you can grasp, to make you more comprehend with this I could not say that green victimology is a new discipline. It's already in your mind, maybe, but this is an illustration for you all. There was a blowout of an oil well, 1,500 meters underwater. So it was underwater and there was a blowout. There were natural gas leaks throughout from the bottom of the oil rigs to the rigs riser, and where it ignites, killing 11 people aboard. The blowout preventer system failed to detect the gas that leaked. Massive amount of gas and oil released from under the ocean. Okay, you can see the picture. Massive amount of gas and oil released from under the ocean surface, spreading everywhere, creating an oil slick, a layer of oil. The oil that washed up on the shoreline was toxic and deadly to the vegetation around. Essential species such as crabs, as well as other species of animals, experience population declines, causing harm to the ecosystem. Okay, and then so do the sea surface, shoreline, and the deep seas ecosystem. Fishing, tourism, and recreational industries in the area affected. The economic impact was like livelihood of the hotel owners, fishermen, and other business were severely affected. The restoration is also costly. British Petroleum as the operator faced legal action and lawsuits from so many various parties. Right, okay. Here, okay, please go to the next slide. The next one, okay. Some people recognize the notion of victim in the area of environmental as the human itself, okay? So do we view that victims of these environmental things is ourselves, human, but it has to be adjusted. We have to see the environmental justice, right, okay, it's about us. The human is the victim, and we have to know more about it, like ecological justice. The victim is the specific environments, the trees, the plants, soil, water. Another one, species justice. Animals could be the victim, and they also has right to be protected. To be protected. If green victimology is taken seriously, these three emerging issues should be taken into consideration. Indonesia already recognized the term ecosystem, but does not provide the comprehensive rulings. Okay, why green victimology? Why? This study refers to the study of social process, our process to cope with the mechanism of how to fight against crimes regarding environmental. Non-human entities should be considered as victims too. Animals, rivers, waters, soil. The goal is threefold. The first is highlight to non-human entities, considering them in the hierarchies of victimization, challenge the notion of equal victimhood. The common idea of environmental or green economy is human who conduct the crime is also the victim. This idea needs to be refined. So we have to enhance our society to go to the other paradigm. Okay, for example, a river was represented as at a restorative justice conference in New Zealand by the chairperson of the Lower Waikato River Enhancement Society, and more generally, the environment is considered as a victim in New Zealand. We have to
3 minutes left.
okay, we have to take that example seriously. Another example, Australia and India trying to protect cetaceans. Cetaceans means like dolphins, whale. Okay, India successfully carried the protection to the cetaceans and make them as a victim of environmental crimes. Green victimology is a newly emerging area of intellectual engagement. The continuing discourse is highly recommended. Further discussion, of course, is absolutely required to comprehend green victimology, green crimes, and other related things. Why green economy? Green economy is sustainable. It's not costly. It's cheaper, and it's unharmless to our environment. Basically, a policy that restores the unbalanced environment or supports victims arose from it, and also has a relation to the economy considered a green economy. So, how do we achieve this? We have to do collaborative work between the government, society, higher education, and other actors. Of course, inclusive education about green-themed issues, knowledge transfer to everyone, establishing good support for the discovery and innovation of green technology, and finally, okay, I just described
1 minute
this,
left.
and next please. Yeah. Okay, I want to summary all of this, and okay, collaborative work is necessary. Inclusive education to everyone about green themed things is important. And establishing good support for the discovery and innovation of green technology also mandatory. Finally, regulations, law enforcement, and law culture have to be brought to balance. Okay, the person who make the law into force is also plays important role. So do the law itself and the society around. Okay. Yep, that's it. I hope it can help you all to comprehend green victimology. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation, Mr. Ariesta. Yeah, if we talk about green economy and green the other green. Yeah, we have.
Yep.
Yeah, because of the climate change, we all know that we have to think more about environment, right?
Yes.
So that's why we know have a lot of green, right?
Yeah, now we
Green
have a lot of
victimology,
greens, and
green economy, and the other green.
the
right?
regulation itself is not enough. We have to make our, what is it, ourselves to not ill-equipped with the comprehension of this kind of green themed issues. That's our problems. It's not about the regulations. It's about us.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Arista Wibisono Anditya. Now we have approximately 5 minutes for Q&A session. So is there any questions? Is there any question for Mr. Arista about the green victimology? Is there any questions?
It has been my pleasure to anyone who doesn't. Okay.
Mr.
I just mentioned. Okay, please.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you for a very great presentation before, but I have one question regarding the concept of this green victimology when this concept tried to put the environment as the main concern of the crime that happened. My question is how this concept of green victimology address the role of let's say a big corporations that their industrials is harming the environment itself, because if we try to look back at the presentation, I think it's more shown or shift towards an individual concept, but how about like a bigger entities like corporation itself, or even like the state itself? That would be my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question. I would like to start first from the scope of the presentation. The scope is now shifting into the victim. Yesterday, I talked about the perpetrator, the actor who conduct the crimes. Okay, so for us, the victim, everything has already occurred. The crime has already occurred. So, who's left? Who are left here? The victims, of course. How about if the victim was a multinational company? Okay, the government has a compensation to restore what is lost from that company. But the point is not only about the company. The point is in us. Okay? Okay, let's say the company has just done a damage to the environment. But the actors in the company doesn't even know what to do. Okay? The green victimology is delving more into how, if that is already happened. Okay, the company still also our concern, but we have to seek more into the victims first, and then about the company.
Last minute.
Okay, in the green victimology theme, we have to do about the environment first, and then to the company, like that. That's a concept. It's not like always like that, but in this concept we have to shift to the victim first and then to the company later. There has been so many solutions about that, but yeah, that is my suggestion. We have to go for the environment first, and if the environment is balanced, we have to talk with the company later about the loss, other loss, financially, like that. Okay, hope it helps. Thank you.
Thank you so much for Mr. Riesta Wibisono Anditya. Thank you so much.
Thank
Give
you.
applause to him, please. Okay, now we move to the next presenter, Mr. M. Zaki Ramadan Al-Rizal. M. Zaki Ramadan Al-Rizal. Yeah, the time is yours, Mr. Zaki.
Hello, good morning everybody. My name is Muhammad Zaki Ramadan Al-Rizal, and today I will be presenting a paper with the title of Legal Consideration Towards Eco-Terrorism as New Form of the Environmental Law Crime. Next, please. Before I start to dwell within what eco-terrorism is, allow me to mention and explain the background of this research. So, as development in the preservation of environment grows, it gives birth to many movements. As you can see in these days, there are countless movements across the globes with the purpose of preserving the environments and making better of our planets. This has ranged from ages of children as well as older people across generations. Despite of their background, everyone is trying to be engaged in the preservation of environments. However, the more these efforts develop, it gives birth to extremists as people becomes concerned with actual issues that they should care about. However, manifested through a wrong method or pushed by egotistical and self-righteousness, which could lead to extremist and manifestation of environmental preservation in an extreme way. Next. That would be the background of our research in eco-terrorism. Next. Now allow me to explain what eco-terrorism is. Aligned with our background, which as the development of environment preservation goes, it gives birth to extremists, and eco-terrorism is one of the products of that development. Basically, eco-terrorism is an effort, organized effort by organizations of a group or a group of people that creates harms towards public property or private property in order to push their agenda in the preservation of environment. If we see from the bigger picture that if we see specifically on what they're trying to do, we could consider that they're trying to fight for a better earth, for a better environment. However, if we see their actions and the manifestation of how are they trying to achieve this goal, we could see that there is a discrepancy between what they're trying to achieve and the effects that they have caused. Next. Now allow me to introduce you to the threat of eco-terrorism. As I have said, there are discrepancies between eco-terrorism, the goals that they're trying to achieve, and the severe effects that they caused in pursuing these goals. Next, please. Before I continue, there should be a differentiation between eco-terrorism and environmental terrorism. As you can see, an eco-terrorist is a terrorist that destroy public properties or private properties in order to push their agenda in order to preserve the environment and the earth. However, environment terrorists, on the other hand, attack the environment in order to push their agenda other than to push their own agenda and not in the field of protecting it. So we have concluded three differentiation. First, the target of the attack. While eco-terrorist attacks the environment, while eco-terrorist attacks for the environment, eco-terrorists attack the environment. So there should be a differentiation between the target where eco-terrorism usually targets big companies as well as companies that cause way too much emission, and environmentalist terrorists attacks the environment itself. The second is the purpose. An eco-terrorist attacks to stop an ongoing environmental damage. So let's say there is a fishing boat that is doing more harm to the environment than the fish that they caught. So an eco-terrorist would destroy that ship in order to stop them from doing so. However, an environmental terrorist would attack the environment for the purpose to push their goal, whatever that is. And the third differentiation is the cause of the movement. As I have said earlier, eco-terrorism is the cause, or the goal of eco-terrorism is to preserve the environment and keep the earth a better place. However, an environmental terrorist, their purpose is other than protecting the environment, and destroying the environment is one of the way to achieve that goal. Next, please. This is some of the cases of an eco-terrorism. In 1989, in the Arizona University, there was fire caused by the Animal Liberation Front, where there is a laboratory in the Arizona University that conducts experiments on animals, which was burned by the ELF. And in 1996, there is an attack on an animal-free fur factory in the United States, which also caused by the Animal Liberation Front. And lastly, on 1998, a Vail ski resort in Colorado was attacked by the Earth Liberation Front. Next, please. Now, if we see the types of the attacks and the goal that they're trying to achieve, we can see that they're trying to preserve the environment. However, one of the attacks on 1998, which targeted towards a ski resort, we can see that they don't necessarily or directly attacking their targets in order to save the environment. Now, as you can see, an Animal Liberation Front as well as Liberation Front,
2 minutes left.
thank you, it's some of the organizations that conduct these actions which was organized. Now, these days we can also see another movement like Just Stop Oil movement, which they destroyed paintings or disturb a public parades or public showings in order to push their agenda to stop oil use. Next, please. Now, what are the regulations on ecoterrorism? To be frankly, to this day, there are no specific regulations on ecoterrorism because of the effects have been covered by criminal law as well as protection on private property. All that have been considered and have ruled over the actions of ecoterrorism. Additionally, an organized crime would also include the regulations of ecoterrorism. Next, please. On the international level, arrangement of ecoterrorism would be one of the examples would be on the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, which protects the sea. Some of the effects of ecoterrorism also impacts or damages the very environment that they're protecting. That's why UNCLOS would be one of the regulations that could oversee these actions. Next. Lastly, one of the actions that have been taken by a domestic government is when the FBI conducted the Operation Backfire, which was the operation to capture the ELF members. Next. In conclusion, in ecoterrorism, while the goal and the cause is for the better for humanity and for the preservation of environment, their manifestation was not right, and it mostly have caused severe damages that makes us wonder if their action is actually for the preservation of the environment or for the preservation of their self-righteousness and ego. Thank you, and that would end my presentation.
Okay, thank you so much. What a great presentation from Mr. Zaki. Yeah, we know that terrorism is not just talk about religion right now, but now we have eco-terrorism, right? And the goals of eco-terrorism is all about environment, right? But the question is how the law see the eco-terrorism right now. Okay, but now we have Q&A session. So, is there any questions for Mr. Zaki? Yeah, Mr. Please.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Let me introduce myself. My name is Nabil Rashid, and I would like to ask you a question about this new topic about ecotourism. By your presentation, I have a question about is that 9-dash line that conducted by the China government could be classified as ecotourism toward Indonesia because the 9-dash line claim from China government make a lot of fuss and dispute along the country, the side of the South China Sea. And one question, and how Indonesia can save our environment from that such a repression or aggression? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question. So the first question would concerns the 9-dash line by the People's Republic of China's government, where I do see that there are conflicts erupting from their actions. However, we need to be able to differentiate that eco-terrorism is an action of terrorism, attacking private properties, attacking industries for the purpose of preserving the environment. So what they're trying to do is to push the idea that environment should be saved and should be preserved by destroying properties. While the 9-dash line by the Chinese government simply is an action to claim sea areas that don't belong to them. However, if there are actions by the Chinese governments that attacks private boats, for example, claiming that it's conducted for the preservation of the environment, then it could also be classified as eco-terrorism. And for the next question, how could Indonesia protect ourselves from these things? To be frankly, at the moment in Indonesia, we don't have an active eco-terrorism movement that would severely threaten the property of Indonesian people. But for the moment, I believe that our criminal system is capable on including these actions into the clauses of our terrorism law.
Okay, thank you so much for Mr. Zaki Ramadan Al-Rizal. Please give applause to Mr. Zaki.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Now we move to the next presenter, Mr. Aditya Agung Pratama. Mr. Aditya Agung Pratama, the time is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Aditya Agung Pratama, and I'm gonna be the presenter from my team with the proceeding paper titled "The Challenge of Blue Economy in ASEAN 2023: The Climate Change and Regional Security Challenge." Ladies and gentlemen, to give some a little background and context, exactly 1 year ago, in July 2022, the United Nations has released a statement that stated the emission of carbon dioxide has reached the highest number in our entire history, ranging and rose to 6% in 2021 alone, and predicted to keep rising until 14% to the next decade. While states still traverse and seek a way out from this climate catastrophe in front of our eyes, the COVID-19 pandemic has hit all of our economic sectors. The World Trade Organization has shown us a data that shown 13% to 33% decrease of trade of merchandise around the world. Seeing this trend, states are seeking a program or a scheme that is environmentally sound in one aspect, but also could boost the utilization of resources and their economic being of their state. Enter the blue economy. Ladies and gentlemen, on the 38th ASEAN Summit on 26 October 2021, our regional cooperation organization, or ASEAN, has seized this opportunity to engage and implement of the blue economy principle. The blue economy itself are focusing to adopt towards a resilient and inclusive use of governance, management, and conservation of ocean, seas, as well as marine and coastal resources, and ecosystem for economic growth across various sectors. Next. However, ladies and gentlemen, this implementation of blue economy are not free of risk. There is a lot of challenge that could halt or giving a detrimental effect that even could completely cease the implementation of blue economy. Posing as a higher risk between all of those challenges are the climate change and regional security. Next. Before we dwell on how or what states needs to do to combat this or to traverse this challenge of climate change, we need to know that climate change is really a critical issue for states like ASEAN states, as our geographical context or our utilizations of natural resources by blue economy are in a brink of extinction or an irreparable damage coming from climate change. So how do states need to mitigate this challenge? The first thing that states could do is to lower the chances or the risk to produce a climate change or a greenhouse gases effect through their policy issues with their own national law between their state. These policy issues could come in two forms. First is a regulatory policies, or a policies that set or implement through national laws of each ASEAN member states with the target of achieving its NDC by 2030 or 2050. Or a fiscal incentive regulation where they give tax incentive, public investment, or carbon pricings to try halt or lower the emission of carbon dioxide and greenhouse gas from their territories. Next. This is the four main elements of blue economy. What they try to achieve or what they try to implement throughout the ASEAN member states. The four elements would be a socio-economic development, a protection and restoration of coastal and marine ecosystem, a focus on food security and livelihood, and transboundary resource management. However, these four elements that we try to achieve would not be, let's say, achievable if the effect of climate catastrophe and climate change taken effect. For example, okay, thank you. For example, in a socio-economic development, the main programs that had been launched by ASEAN member state is throughout an ecotourism. There's a lot of beaches in ASEAN member states. There are a lot of beach in Thailand. It's a lot of beautiful beach in Bali or Indonesia itself. But the effect of climate change could turn this destination of ecotourism to losing their main interests, such as the coral reefs or the a clear blue sea because of the climate catastrophe. And another example is on the focus on food security and livelihood. Ladies and gentlemen, the Food and Agricultural Organization under the UN has shown that fisheries, whether it's a free caught ranging fish from the sea or the one that we breed in land, are having a degrading statistic because the effect of the climate change. It disrupt their migratory rate, it's disrupt their fertility, which is will in a long range impact on the food security itself when all of these fishes are becoming more scarce and becoming more hard to breed or to caught, focusing and degrading on the transboundary resource management. Next. Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot deny that there is already some damage done by a climate change effect. While it's important to mitigate and, let's say, prepare ourselves for the incoming effect, the effect that already taken place needs to be addressed as well. Therefore, it was important for states to adapt to all the damage that had been done. How states adapt to this climate change? States could adapt throughout their national adaptation plan, which is a set of regulation or more like a framework or guideline for states to traverse of how they could adapt and adjust to the effect that already taken place by climate change. This national adaptation plan could consist for a laws or regulation and policies like what we just thought before, and then it could also include a risk assessment about what point that already attacked or already caused damage by climate change and what we need to try to preserve, also with financial mechanism.
2 minutes left.
Okay, thank you. Like, along with climate change, there are also a threat of regional security. We could not deny that by living along with another state, there could have been some friction between states that threaten our position itself. This regional security could take from two threats. First is the traditional security threat, like a military threats and infringement on state sovereignty, but also a non-traditional security threat like piracy, armed robbery, human trafficking, or even illicit substance and small arms trafficking. Next. But but throughout all of that security threat, I think just like what we know yesterday from Associate Dr. Salawati Basir, the South China Sea or the Nine-Dash Land from the China's claim is the biggest threat towards our regional security, because the two contested islands, the Paracel Islands and Spratly Islands, are rich in natural resources such as oil, natural gas, and fisheries, which is tried to control and claimed by one state only. Next. This is the scheme or the implementation of security or blue security, which is a security that trying to preserve and protect our marine environment that already been developed or taken in action by ASEAN. As we can see, it can ranging from the first ASEAN Regional Forum in 1994 throughout to the regional cooperation which is part of Malacca Strait security that took place in 2012 and still evolving and drafted until to this day, adapting to a much more new security threat that we're facing. Next.
Last minute.
Yeah, thank you. That would conclude my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for a great presentation from Mr. Aditya Agung Pratama. Now we move to the next session, Q&A session. So is there any question from you guys for Mr. Pratama? Is there any question? Yes, Mr. Please.
Test. Okay. Thank you for the opportunity and thank you for the presentation. I have a question concerning blue economy. As the presenter have mentioned earlier, it is one of the challenges in Asia on blue economy. So my question is, by acknowledging the fact that most of ASEAN countries are still developing, is there any way where we can find a middle ground where exploitation in the sea will be balanced with blue economy, considering that we still need, not we, most of ASEAN countries still need to exploit the sea, maybe simply to fulfill their quota, maybe because of developing economies. Is there any middle ground that we can find between exploiting the sea for the developing countries and for blue economy? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for a really great question from Mr. Ramadan. The middle ground itself would be the blue economy itself, to put it in a way, because yes, we are, most of us are developing countries, but we also need to fulfill our needs. We need to fulfill the food for our people, the energy for our people, and therefore the natural resources is the one that we are aiming for. But to be noted again, because we are a developing country, we still lack in a lot of things. Let's say human resources or the technologies. When we are making it more difficult to preserve the environment by consuming a lot of carbon dioxide or greenhouse gases for the sake of fulfilling our needs. By implementing the blue economy itself, we try to answer that challenge by not only to take or utilize our resources, but also to maintain and preserve it. Because back to the very core concept of blue economy itself, it's the preservation and the protection of our marine environment and coastal environment, while we also utilizing it for our economical gain and needs. That would be my question.
Okay, thank you so much for the answer, Mr. Aditya Agung Pratama. Thank you so much. Please give applause to him. Thank you. Now we move to the last presenter, Miss Nadia Nabela. Miss Nadia Nabela, are you there? Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, Mr. Okay. Mr. Rafi Al-Rashid.
Yes.
Okay, please, Mr. Rafi Al-Rashid, the time is yours.
Okay. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's my honor to be here and representing our paper that authorized by Mr. Joko Stiono and my fellow co-author, Nadia Nabila, Syafiqur Rahman, and me, myself, Nafi Al-Rashid. We want to talking about renewable energy, regulatory urgency in global energy security. We all know, like the next slide. Yes. We all know that the fundamental changes in the world's energy system have an impact on politics, economics, and society as a whole. In order to ensure global energy security, this study aims to demonstrate the necessity of renewable energy regulation, especially in Indonesia. Indonesia does not yet have comprehensive law and regulation on renewable energy. The geopolitical future of Indonesia could be impacted by this situation if conflict arises with other nations. We have a very common examples, like as we can see now, the conflict between Russia and Ukraine a year ago has impacted many nations, many food stock nations that primarily they consume wheat, and it can causes Indonesia also in the future. Next. Ladies and gentlemen, we all know and realize that the globe has been transitioning to a post-carbon future era. Seems like the increased development and renewable energy over the previous decade. This energy transition is prompted by two major factors. The first, people's attempt to address the climate catastrophe. We all know and maybe we realize that as a Javanese myself, living among paddy rice in this Java, especially Central Java, maybe we realize that the planting time, the planting cycles of paddy rice in Java is always differ time by time. It's because the climate has changed. The season is unbalanced anymore. We may get a sunshine in the morning and suddenly we get heavy rain in the noon. And the second factor is the low cost of renewable energy technologies, which cost less than fossil fuel-based generator. In this, we have a lot of evidence also, like now we starting use electric vehicles, electric car, electric motorcycle, then fossil fuel-based vehicles. Next. In this presentation, we want you to know that energy issues are always a factor in international disputes because they affect both the viability of life and the possibility for continued national growth. Controlling its energy resources can help a nation achieve its political objective. Only a country's energy dependency will not as a sign of basic weakness. Indonesia has a diverse range of natural resources, including energy. It plays a significant role in the energy sector because Indonesia is one of the world's top exporters of coal and liquefied natural gas. This wealth is the capital required to build a large country. However, thus far, non-renewable energy, mainly fossil energy, has dominated in Indonesia. The important role of energy in the progress of a country, the Indonesian government should have stipulated special regulation governing renewable energy as the foundation for the nation's resilience in the future. To all my beloved researchers, this study employed a normative legal approach focusing on the analysis of primary and secondary legal materials. The objective was to comprehend law as a regulatory framework and positive norm that governs people's life. The research methodology utilized an analytical descriptive approach drawing upon legal views and many doctrines. Next, maybe. Next, discussion. Yes. In our paper, we would like to discuss the first A, renewable energy from geopolitical aspect. It is generally understood that fossil fuels are the basis for contemporary energy system, economic expansion, and lifestyles in many countries. In the previous 2 centuries, the usage of energy has increased 50-fold as a result of its exploitation. It all began with the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century, when coal replaced a biomass as the primary fuel for steam engines. Additionally, the second wave of energy transformation is happened in 20th century. The possibility by use of petroleum as the alternate fuel to coal. Since then, control over the production and trade of fossil energy such as coal, gas, and oil has grown to be crucial aspect of power politics and has also contributed to the formation of the map world's geopolitical landscape. The nation who have fossil-based energy always controlled fossil energy reserve in the world.
You can name it. Next. Next. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, because global energy geopolitics is so sensitive to country stability, it has an impact on both producing and consuming nations.
3 minutes left.
Okay. In the area of energy securitization, the organization like OPEC and particularly Russia retain considerable sway. The powerful powers include both developed industrialized nations and significant consumer nations like China and India. They are the key participant to guaranteeing and reliable energy supply in the world. Next. Indonesian policy on facing acceleration of energy transformation. In order to power its economic activity, Indonesia currently significantly relies on non-renewable resources including coal, oil, and natural gas. Although output of fossil fuel has been dropping over the past 10 years, this is in contrast to the fact that in 2019 to 2020, it only reached out 740,000 barrels per day. As a result, the Indonesian government has to start encouraging the use of renewable energy and changing the paradigm, so the renewable energy no longer seen as an alternative, but rather as a vital energy. The regulation, including the geothermal law and the energy laws, need to be strengthened to serve as a legal framework for the development of renewable energy system. It's needed for assurances and legal certainty for the energy transition to a sustainable energy system. Next, maybe we can skip to the conclusion.
Last minute.
Yes, the conclusion, please. Next. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, at the last part of our research, we want to acknowledge that Indonesia is still reliant on non-renewable energy, such as coal, oil, and natural gas. This is because renewable energy rules have yet to be thoroughly addressed in positive Indonesian legislation, despite the fact that the aim for renewable energy integration in Indonesia is approaching in just a few years more to come. It's 2025 to be exact. Indonesia set a target of at least 23% new energy and renewable energy by 2025 and at least 31% by 2050. As long as the economy is satisfied and the usage of oil, earth, and coal as the current national energy backbone is minimized. This is because renewable energy rules have yet to be adequately addressed in Indonesia positive law, despite the fact that the aim for renewable energy integration in Indonesia is approaching in just a few years. Therefore, the urgency of renewable energy regulation to maintain global energy security is an absolute fact that must be resolved immediately to manifest national energy security. It's a precondition for Indonesia to be a developed country. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Rafli Al-Rashid. Yeah, we all know that renewable energy is really important for us today because the climate change, right? So the regulation about it is urgent to maintain global energy security. Thank you so much for Mr. Rafli Al-Rashid. Now we have approximately 5 minutes for Q&A session. So is there any questions? Is there any question for the last presenter today? No? If we don't have any question, that thank you so much for Mr. Rafli Al-Rashid.
Okay, thank you. But because we talking about renewable energy, I want to close my presentation with a poem from Turkish poem.
Please, yeah.
They're talking about wind and water. It's called I'm Afraid. You say that you love the rain, but you open your umbrella when it rains. You say that you love the sun, but you find a shadow spot when the sun shines. You say that you love the wind, but you close your windows when wind blows. This way I'm afraid when you say that you love me too. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the great poem from Mr. Rafli. Okay. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. We are now at the very last moment of the presentation and discussion session for today. Before I end this session, I would like to thank all of the participants who already delivered their presentation. And also, I would like to apologize if there are any mistake from me personally. After this session, please come back to the main room to join the next keynote speech from Dahliana Hassan, SHMHLMM, PhD. Thank you for your participation and have a good day.
Ladies and gentlemen, please have a seat because we are about to begin the next sessions. Ladies and gentlemen, please have a seat because we are about to begin the next sessions. Thank you very much.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the second day of the third International Conference on Law, Economic, and Governance 2023. We hope everyone had a blissful rest and is ready to start the second day. If I may direct your attention to the screen, here we have the speakers for the third plenary session of ICOLEG 2023. Today's discussion would be moderated by Mr. Diastama Anggita Ramadan, SH LLM. Mr. Diastama is an expert in the Indonesian state law, Indonesian lawmaking process, and constitutional law. Mr. Diastama finished his bachelor's degree in Universitas 11 Maret and his master's degree in Cardiff University. To Mr. Diastama Anggita Ramadan, SH LLM, the time and place is yours.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone. Okay, thank you. Thank you for all the participants that already joined the third International Conference on Law, Economics, and Governance. Please give a round of applause to all of you. Okay, thank you. And for the third plenary session, we will have two notable speakers. Firstly, we'll have Ibu Dahliana Hasan SH Tax PhD. She is the Dean of the Faculty of Law Universitas Gadjah Mada. She'll be joining us online today. Good morning, Ibu Dahliana.
Good morning, Mas Diastama.
Okay, the committee, please. The sound, we cannot hear Ibu Dahliana. And secondly, we have Bapak Iman Prihandono, SH LLM PhD. He is the Dean of the Faculty of Law of Universitas Erlangga. To Bapak Iman Prihandono, kindly come to the stages. Give round applause to Bapak Iman Prihandono. Okay, so this plenary session will be divided into two sessions. Firstly, we will have Ibu Dahliana Hasan as the first speaker. And then secondly, we will have Bapak Iman Prihandono as the second speaker. Good morning, Ibu Dahliana.
Good morning.
Okay,
Have
so
you
now we
heard
can...
my voice, Mas?
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
Oh,
Thank you. So, how are you, Ibu Dahliana? Is that everything all right
good.
there?
Yeah, but I've got to do in university, so I borrowed the vice rector room to present my session.
That's all right, Ibu Dahliana. Okay, so before we begin, let's all together see the short biography of Ibu Dahliana Hasan, the short video. Okay, so currently she is the Dean of the Faculty of Law Universitas Gajah Mada. Without any further ado, because she have a very limited and short of time, Ibu Dahliana, around 15 until 20 minutes. So we will have one participant that can ask you a question. Okay, Ibu Dahliana? Okay,
Yeah.
so 15 until 20 minutes, the time is yours, Ibu Dahliana.
Okay, thank you, Mas Dias. Let me share the screen. Okay, could you see my slide here?
Yes, a carbon tax policy in Indonesia, Ibu Dahliana.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Bapak, Ibu, Mas, Mbak, who joined this event, this international conference that is run by Faculty of Law, Universitas Diponegoro, Semarang, and I'm honored to be invited by the team or the ICOLEG team, as well as the Dean of Law Faculty Universitas Diponegoro. And I also deliver my best regards to Pak Iman Prihandono as my colleague over there in Macquarie University. Actually, I've got a theme about carbon tax, but I limited my talking about carbon tax in Indonesia. And it is an interesting topic because this policy has become so popular not only today, but when we got back to 1990s, there are many countries that has implemented carbon tax, and this policy is known as economic instrument or market-based instrument that can be used to manage the environment. Let's begin with a brief history of carbon tax. And in fact, if I say a carbon tax, it is a part of environmental tax. And as you can see in the screen, in 1920s, actually it begins introduced by ACPGO, European economies that concern for the environmental problems, and this is the concern of ICPGO, how to manage the environment for future generation. He offered the concept of environmental tax, which place a price to negative externalities that emerge from production or consumption of goods and services, and placing the right price according to ACPGO is taken into account all social costs or full social costs from polluting activities. Well, actually sounds good, but at the time in 1920s, this concept was not so popular because there are many challenges and also disagreement from other scholars. But then if we move into 1990s, there is evolution of Pigouvian taxes because many countries starting to use environmental taxes in the effort of combating environmental problems. So the first countries that implement environmental taxes actually are Nordic countries. For example, Finland, Sweden, Denmark, Norway. They introduce ecological taxes, but the concept of Pigouvian taxes has been modified in this case. So it means some environmental taxes that is used in developed and developing countries or in the Nordic countries, not only the reflection of full social cost of negative externalities, but they introduce also a proxy of full social cost of negative externalities, such as, for example, in this case is motor vehicle taxes. So they only account 2 or 3 or even 1 of negative externalities of using motor vehicle. For example, in this case, if we just take one negative externalities that emerge from using motor vehicle is damaging road, or maybe because emit CO2 emission or pollution in the air, so the air pollution also taken into account in the calculation. So in 2015, this is a new, I don't know, but it's not a new idea, but this is an effort of a global agreement, because climate change is becoming a global emergency, goes beyond national borders. So to tackle the negative impact of climate change, the leaders took action to sign an agreement. In this case, it's Paris Agreement that reflect commitment from all countries to reduce their emission and work together to adapt the impact of climate change. So one instrument that taken into account here is a carbon tax, which is a reflection of Pigouvian taxes. So the concept of carbon tax from 1920s that we call environmental tax here is actually holding a principle, namely polluter pays principle. Polluter pays principle, you can see what is the definition of polluter pays principle in the screen, on the screen. So in this case, polluters should bear all costs of negative externalities. So it is reflected on the price of goods or services by placing again the right price. In this case, the polluter is expected to alter their behavior, their polluting behavior. The concept of carbon tax actually is not, like I said before, is not a new, because if we see from the definition from European Commission or Eurostat, as well as the OECD, there was no difference between Eurostat and OECD. OECD and Eurostat categorize environmental taxes into many categories, or 4 categories here: energy taxes, transport taxes, pollution taxes, as well as resources taxes. But then if we talk about carbon tax or CO2 taxes, CO2 taxes fall under energy taxes because it is the use of energy product such as petrol, gas, coal, electricity that is becoming point of categorization. So in this case, what the European Commission stated, as well as OECD stated, make categorization of environmental taxes, it is targeting the tax base and also tax rate that is related closely to negative externalities. And the motivation is the same, which is altering behavior. So if we talk about the reason of why many countries implement a carbon tax, actually we have 2 main reasons. The first reason is looking for instrument that economically efficient to minimize the environmental problems. And the second one is looking at the revenue generated instrument. So government could use the revenue not only for general budget, but also, for example, specific environmental problems. And some scholars say that the implementation of carbon tax in many countries actually has benefit, which is double dividend. Double dividend, it means they've got revenue, they also got instrument that minimize the environmental problems or pollution in this case because of the emission of CO2. I've got 3 examples in the implementation of carbon tax in some countries. As you can see on the screen, I choose Sweden, Japan, as well as India. In this case, there are success stories, but also failure in the implementation of carbon tax. A success story happened in Sweden and Japan. As you can see, Sweden carbon tax is implemented in 1991, and you can see on the screen that primarily the carbon tax in Sweden levied on fossil fuels, and it is used for heating purposes and motor fuels. And the rate, it is interesting because Sweden carbon tax, when it started to introduce in 1991, it is not a high tax rate that has been implemented, but it is a gradual tax rate that has been implemented from around $26 per ton of CO2, and then right now it reached $126. And it is interesting when we talk about revenue generated from carbon tax, because the government in Sweden is decided to use the carbon tax revenue not for environmental purposes per se, that they just placing the revenue to just reduce the distortionary taxes that has been implemented by Sweden government to people, such as income taxes. So in other countries, for example, the success story also happened in Japan. Japan has introduced the carbon tax in 2012, and this is becoming the first Asian country to implement a carbon tax and applies to fossil fuels such as petroleum, oil product, and natural gas, as well as coal. And likewise, Sweden, Japan also implement carbon tax rate gradually. The first, it's only a lower tax rate, and then has stalled since 2016. And if we compare between Sweden and Japan, for the revenue generated from carbon tax, it is different because Japan place the revenue generated to supplement renewable energy project and to enhance energy saving measures. The other story that maybe represent the failure of implementation of carbon tax is in India. As you can see in the screen, there is a clean energy tax in India, and it has been introduced in 2010. It is like or similar to a carbon tax on the production and importation of coal, lignite, and peat. First introduction of carbon tax or the tax in India, it is the same as Sweden and Japan in terms of the rate. They have gradual rate and then has scaled up the rate in 2016. But then there is a problem in the management of revenue. The National Clean Energy and Environment Fund in India only got 37% of the revenue. So the Indian government in here decided to abolish this clean energy tax. That's the success story and also the failure story of implementation of carbon tax in some countries. So what about in Indonesia? When we talk about carbon tax in Indonesia, actually this policy is not new for Indonesian government, because when we got back in 2006, the government of Indonesia actually would like to introduce environmental taxes in the amendment of law number 34 of 2000 on local taxes and charges. However, there are some issues in the proposal of the environmental taxes that would like to introduce by the government of Indonesia, as well as there are some debates in parliament at the time. And the issue is about the unclear subject, the unclear object, as well as about the issue of earmarking. So at the time, environmental taxes that would like to be inserted in the amendment of law of local taxes and charges was just disappeared. And if we talk in 2009 until 2021, there is a law on local taxes and charges. We know about law number 2028 of 2009. In law on local taxes and charges, there are some environmentally related taxes. I mentioned before, in OECD countries, they know about direct and indirect environmental taxes. And most of countries applied indirect environmental taxes or a proxy of full social costs of environmental taxes in many countries. And in Indonesia, actually, environmentally related taxes also has been applied by the government in the form of local taxes. For example, if we talk about motor vehicle taxes, if we talk about fuel taxes, as well as water taxes, they are falling into the categorization of environmental taxes that has been proposed by the OECD or Eurostat. So in this case, however, if we talk about the primary motivation of environmentally related taxes in Indonesia, the motivation is going to make us not believe that it is for the environment, because the motivation is only for revenue generating. So it will fail actually to induce altering behavior of the polluters. So move into 2022. In 2022, the government of Indonesia introduced law on harmonization of taxation regulation, or in Bahasa we call it Undang-Undang HPP. And the government of Indonesia also amended law number 28 of 2009 and becoming law on financial relation between the central and local government, or we call it Undang-Undang HKPD, UU HKPD in Bahasa. The two laws in Indonesia, UU HPP regulates the carbon tax, and law on financial relation between the central and local government, or Undang-Undang HKPD, governs some environmental taxes as previous law on local taxes and charges. And because we have two laws that govern types of environmental taxes, the concept actually the same as OECD concept of environmental taxes. But then if we talk about Indonesian environmental taxes at the central level, it is on the form of carbon taxes and regulated in Article 13, if I'm not mistaken, of law on harmonization of taxation regulation, or Undang-Undang HPP. And actually, this is has a function of combating GHG emission, and it's to apply starting on 1st April 2022 for coal fire. Yeah. Okay, 2 more minutes. Okay. For coal fire plants, but the implementation is on hold until now, until the implementing regulation are not ready yet. So I will move quickly on the carbon tax, and this already have, and I would like to say about the scheme of Indonesia carbon tax. Actually, the Indonesian carbon tax is combination of carbon tax and emission trading system. The rate of carbon tax in Indonesia is determined on 30,000 rupiah per ton of CO2 equivalent. But then if we talk about the combination of emission trading system and carbon taxes, actually this emission trading system as first that has been applied to coal-based plant industry. And then if industry doesn't fulfill the threshold of the emission of CO2 emission that has been emitted by the industry, so the carbon tax has been applied. Okay, I will move into some issues of Indonesian tax regulation, because we've actually talking about some issues in the regulation on a paper. There is some issues regarding the purpose issue or the objective issue, whether the carbon tax in Indonesian regulation or Undang-Undang HPP is it regulating or revenue generating instrument. It should be clear in a regulation that states which one that has been objective of the Indonesian government in implementing carbon tax. If the carbon tax is generating revenue, it should be stated clearly. And if the carbon tax aims to altering behavior, it means it should be stated clearly also in the regulation. And the important thing also about the linkage issue, tax rate and tax base. It is also unclear in Article 13 of Undang-Undang HPP where the tax rate and tax base is closely linked to the negative externalities. And the two issue, revenue earmarking issue as well as the implementing regulation, actually become also a contentious issue that we can talk about that one. But then when we talk about whether a carbon tax policy in Indonesia promote environmental justice, we talk about environmental justice itself. What is the goal of environmental justice? Actually, the goal of promoting justice or environmental justice is on the respect of protection and fulfillment of environment rights. In this case, actually, the policy deems to have goals to protect and fulfill environmental rights, which is the right to have clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. Why? There are three reasons that I can give you. The first one, it is a cost-effective way to give firm incentive to reduce GHG emission, because in this case, when the price has been designed properly, it means we talk about the linkage issue, the rate also, the tax base has been closely linked to negative externalities, so it pushes emitters or polluters to confront with environmental costs of their action and forced to manage their carbon emission. The second one, it is about or related to revenue generated from carbon tax actually. We call it budgetary sources. In fact, if we talk about carbon tax, we don't talk about revenue generated instrument. We talk about altering behavior instrument. But then we refer to the dividend or the motivation of the implementation of carbon tax in many countries. Some of countries, even in Nordic countries, when starting implemented carbon tax, it would like to generate considerable revenue by setting the carbon tax rate lower and then gradually increase over time. And it needs to evaluate and adjust periodically. So when we talk about generating considerable revenue, it means we talk about how to use that revenue to foster green growth. For example, sustainable growth and then creating new green businesses and new job opportunities for the people. The last one here is about the incentive that has been provided by carbon taxes. So the incentive that has been provided by this policy is a permanent and it is efficient to encourage firms or government to invest in research and development. Therefore, some environmentally friendly energy alternative or stuff here, such as wind power, nuclear energy, solar power, and others has been found and then used for the welfare of the people. some of revenue from carbon taxes, it is suggested to put into the research and development and to engage in a technological innovation to minimize carbon dioxide emission. I think those three reasons that I can say carbon tax in Indonesia seems to have that rationally behind the policy promoting environmental justice, but it is on the paper sounds promising. But when we have to wait until the implementing regulation and action of the government of Indonesia has been decided where we are going to with the carbon tax policy. I think that's all my 2 cents, Mas Dias. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Give round applause to Ibu Dahliana. Thank you, Ibu Dahliana. So, yeah, since we have a very limited time, very short time with Ibu Dahliana, so we'll only open the question and answer session for only one participant. Is there any questions from the participant? You can raise your hand regarding the carbon tax. Yeah. Please introduce yourself and your institutions, and then briefly the questions for Ibu Dahliana.
Okay, thank you to Mr. Moderator. My name is Zaki Ramadan, and I am from Universitas Diponegoro. And I do have one question for Ibu Dahliana. It concerns about one part of your presentation, which explains about revenue from the taxation of the carbon of industry. And my question is, will it be better instead of taxing these carbon emissions to simply stop them rather than taxing them and gaining benefit from those tax and putting those money into climate courses? Why don't we just stop them in the first place and instead of taxing them? Thank you.
Time is yours, Bu Dahliana.
Okay, thank you, Mas Jestama. Thank you, Mas Zaki, for the question. Whether it is better to stop the pollution or CO2 emission rather than taxing them. Is it your question, right, Mas Zaki? It is interesting, actually, what you say about why we have to tax. Because actually, if we have a theory in using all instruments to combat pollution, we have CAC, control and command instrument, as well as we have information-based strategy. We have voluntarism. We also have economic instrument. One of economic instrument that has been used by many countries in the world is carbon taxes or environmental taxes. There is a question, should or shouldn't we tax? But in my opinion, all instruments should be used to combat pollution, Mas Zaki, rather than we just use CAC instrument. Like you said, just stop the pollution. But we cannot just stop the pollution, because when we talk about CAC instrument, there is also a disadvantage when we use CAC, control and command instrument, because it is pricey to implement CAC when the pollution happen. Instead of forcing the regulation or sanction, or we call it penalty or whatever that is included in CAC instrument, we use also other instrument, for example, economic instrument. So I think it would be better to mix between one instrument to another instrument. We also preventing pollution to be happen by imposing taxes, imposing emission trading scheme in here. And then after that, we also impose CAC instrument as well as information-based strategy. It will end up in a better solution for our environment, clean, healthy, as well as sustainable environment. Thank you for your question. If you have any question, just drop by email as well as you can give to the committee. Thank you, Mas Dias. That's my answer.
Thank you, Ibu Dahliana. Give a round of applause to session from Ibu Dahliana. Thank you once again. But before we close your session, can you give a short closing statement for your presentation, Ibu Dahliana?
Okay, thank you, Mas Dias. Closing statement of my presentation is carbon tax is a promising policy for handling the pollution or CO2 pollution in many countries as well as in Indonesia. But then we have to be optimistic with the use of a carbon tax in Indonesia. However, we have to also what we call accompany the government and give the suggestion and advice to the government how the carbon tax should be implemented, how the implementing regulation should be in a positive or on the track with our prime motivation, which is altering behavior. Thank you, Mas Dias. That's my closing statement.
Thank you. Give a round of applause to Ibu Dahliana once again. Thank you, Ibu Dahliana, for sparing your time. We know that you are very have a lot of activities, and then you will do sparing your time to present your presentation here in the 3rd International Conference of Economic Law and Government. Thank you once again to Ibu Dahliana.
Thank you, Mas Dias, and I ask your permission to leave this forum.
Yes, you might leave the forum, Ibu Dahliana. Thank you once again for coming here. Okay, so that is the presentation from Ibu Dahliana Hassan SH MTex PhD. She is the Dean of the Faculty of Law Universitas Gadjah Mada. And then now we've come to the second speaker of this 3rd plenary session. He is the Bapak Iman Prihandono SH LLM PhD. However, before we start the second speaker, shall we look together the short biography of Bapak Iman Prihandono? Give a round of applause to Bapak Iman Prihandono. Currently, he is the Dean of the Faculty of Law of Universitas Airlangga. Good morning, Bapak Iman Prihandono. How are you today? Good, okay. So, Bapak Iman Prihandono will present his materials in front of this forum for around 30 minutes, Pak Iman. And then we will have approximately 20 minutes for the question and answer session. Bapak Iman Prihandono, without any further ado, the time is yours. Yes, yes, please. Thank you, Bapak.
Tes, oke. Good. All right. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good morning. The Honorable Dean of Faculty of Law, Universitas Diponegoro, Ibu Profesor Retno, the Honorable Ibu Laksmi, the Vice Dean, and the Head of Committee of this conference, the distinguished professors, speakers, students, and colleagues. Thank you so much for inviting me, for having me in this conference. It gives me opportunity to say hello to old colleagues from Undip, to meet you all, and then most importantly to have soto bangkong and lumpia again, some things that is not available in Surabaya. Good. Thank you, Mas Dias, also for the introduction. My presentation, first of all, is apologize. The committee has given me topics, in fact, on refugees, climate refugees, but this is what my project in progress, so I think it will be good to share with all of you in this conference and to get feedback before, of course, I published my project, this project. My presentation will be on the this one, examining the readiness of Indonesian civil code to entertain climate litigation, a comparative study on the Milieu Defensie versus Royal Dutch Shell case in the Netherlands. Why the Royal Dutch Shell case, or we call it Shell case, is important because it was the first time ever in the world where a court, a national court, determined that a private entity, in this case is a company, has obligation to reduce carbon emission, and then thus has also obligation to prevent the impact of climate change. Previously, as we know, under international law, public international law, those only states have obligations to reduce, to deal with the issues on climate change. So yes, so I will going to discuss these topics. But before I enter into further discussion, I will also put forward why Shell case is also important for us, for Indonesian lawyers, in developing our civil code, and to see whether our civil code is ready to prevent climate change in the future. First and the foremost is that we share similar rules on unlawful act under our civil code. Onrecht matig dat, what we call as onrecht matig dat in the Dutch. In fact, we inherit this rule from the Dutch about 1 century ago. So our 1365, our 1365 burgerlijk wetboek is a rules that have been implemented for us more than a century, 100 years. In wait, we are not here yet, please. Okay. So that's why we should examine whether our civil code, our onrecht matig dat rules is still up to date with the recent challenge of climate change. Secondly, Indonesia and the Dutch are two countries that we both ratify the Paris Agreement. So we all have to set our NDC, nationally determined conditions. We have targets to reach. The same with the Dutch government. That's why Shell case was brought by a number of NGOs based on the Dutch NDCs. We also, Indonesian government, have also set our NDC. Thirdly, Indonesia has a number of companies that operate in fossil fuels industries, fossil fuels sectors, just like Shell. In fact, Indonesia is the largest exporters of coal now in the world. So that's why it's very important for us to see our rules on rahmatik dat, whether the same case also can be brought in Indonesian court against companies using our target NDCs. Fourthly, as an archipelagic state, Indonesia is one of the most vulnerable countries in the world that can be affected by climate change. The rise of sea levels has caused many islands sinking gradually, including Java Island, the island that we are living in. In fact, there is one case of Pulau Pari against Holcim, a Swiss company. Background why my presentation today is important. Yes, milieu defense et al. Versus RDS or cell case can be used to see whether Indonesian Civil Code, our 1365, can be used to the same case in Indonesia. Next, please. Yeah. If we compare literally the two rules on rahmatik dat, there's not much different. The Article 162 of the Dutch Civil Code has been amended, I think, 4 times since the first time we used the same rules about 100 years ago. Although they are very similar, but of course there are differences here and there. But one of the most important feature is that in Dutch Civil Code, it also recognized that on rahmatik dat or unlawful act can also be coming up from the unwritten law, the violation of unwritten law. The same with our 1365, the 1365 BW. The unlawful act comprises the following category: written and unwritten. This was decided in the case of Lindenbaum Cohen, that unwritten law can be used to determine whether on rahmatik dat exists. Okay? So both are different but mostly the same. 162 and 1365. Next slide, please. There are two issues that very important in this case when the judge in the Netherlands court, in the Hague court, decide this case. First is the standard that have been used by the Dutch, the unwritten law, and then the causality. We will discuss these two issues, the unwritten law and then the causality. Why causality is important? Because as we know, Shell is a company that operating in oil and gas industries. They are allowed to sell fossil fuels. Okay? But how come they are obliged to reduce carbon emission, if they are allowed to operate in fossil fuels industries, that means if they have to reduce carbon emission, that means Shell at some point have to stop selling fossil fuel. So at some point, Shell have to move to a new and renewable energy business instead of fossil fuel business. Causality is important in determining on rheumatic death. They are allowed to sell fossil fuels, but at the same time, they have to oblige not to emit carbon. Next, please. Okay. First is the unwritten law or unwritten law. In this case, the Dutch court using standard of care. So there is, when using unwritten law, the Dutch court using what they call a standard of care. So every person, every entities are obliged to follow one standard of care, or two, or any standard of care. In this case, the court using due care, although it is not binding, although it is not a binding instrument, then a person or an entity must follow. The court used UNGP, UN Guiding Principle on Business and Human Rights, and the court believed that these standards are universally endorsed because it contains human rights obligations, including those emphasized in the ICCPR, International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and other internationally recognized human rights such as the European Convention on Human Rights. So, as we know, UNGP is a non-binding instrument. It regulates how companies, corporate, should prevent causing human rights violations. But the court used this standard to determine that Shell, as a company, have an obligation of due care obligation. So yes, you are allowed to sell fossil fuel, gasoline, and anything that you produce, but you still have due care to do. Based on what? Based on even on non-binding instrument. Okay, so that's one feature of the decision. Second, how to determine causality. In that case, Shell argues that Shell company is not the only one who emit carbon. There are other companies. Of course, as we know, there are Chevron, what else? Even Pertamina. That's what I'm going to talk. Whether we can bring such case against Indonesian company. But the argument was not accepted by the court. The court was referring to Urgenda judgment. In Urgenda, the court decided that state of the Netherlands cannot evade its partial responsibility in managing climate change. So there is the Urgenda case come up with one landmark decision, features, that is the fair share approach. So the court introduced in Urgenda case, the court for the first time introduced what they call as fair share approach. So every entities have an obligation of fair share. So even if you are not the only one who are polluting the environment with carbon emission, you have fair share. Okay. So similarly, in this case, in the Shell case, the court decided that although Shell cannot be held fully liable, it does not ultimately erase its duty to fulfill its obligation to reduce the emission of greenhouse gases because of the fair share approach. So let's see if Indonesian Civil Code 1365 can also accommodate standard of care and can also accommodate fair share approach. And then we can discuss whether our 1365 is still reliable in the case of in facing climate change. Next, please. Okay. Yeah, next, please. Unwritten law or standard of care. In fact, in many cases, in previous cases, the Indonesian court have adopted standard. In Mandalawangi case, in fact, the court have adopted the standard of precautionary principle. Although in that time, even in that time, our environmental law has not yet adopting the 1992 Rio Declaration precautionary principle. So its precautionary principle had not been the law at that time in Indonesia, but the court make a breakthrough by adopting precautionary principle in Mandalawangi case. That means it's still unwritten law. The status of precautionary principle at that time, in the time when Mandalawangi case was being trialed by the court, the status was not yet a positive law, but still non-binding for us. It's unwritten. Okay, in other case, in Kalista Alam case, the judge in that case emphasized that judge shall be progressive when adjudicating environmental cases due to its complex nature, such as the fact that they need to be proven by scientific evidence. So, scientific evidence is important. Next slide, please. In Ari Rompas, 2005, this one, or 2006, the court also adopted the intergenerational equity principle. Intergenerational equity principle, a principle that has not been adopted by our environmental law. So, in short, regarding the unwritten law, it's not new for our court, Indonesian court. So, 1365, in fact, can accommodate unwritten law. Next, please. Second is the causality. There are three main causality theories that have been adopted by Indonesian court: conditio sine qua non, adequate verursaking, and then toerekening naar redelijkheid theory. I'm not the expert of private law. I'm at on the international law, but perhaps friends from private law department will be better explaining what these theories are. But mostly Indonesian court will use the adequate verursaking theory, if I'm not mistaken. Please, those who are from the private law department can explain. The adequate theory, or the should have been expected to occur theory, is more or less the same with what the judge in Shell case was taken. So yes, if 1365 is used to trial the same case with the Royal Dutch Shell case, I think the judge will have no problem to also implement the fair share principle. Fair share principle. To establish causality. Because if there is no causality, there is no onrehmatik dat. So that's the argument. Next, please. In conclusion, Indonesia is currently in the early stage when it comes to thought-based climate litigation. The Royal Dutch Shell case can be used as a good example how we should respond to the same case in the future. We have to, although it has not been trialed yet, but perhaps sometimes, I don't know, we don't know, NGOs in Indonesia can bring the same case, similar case to Indonesian companies. Or in fact, there is one case against Switzerland companies brought by Indonesian plaintiffs for fishermen in Swiss court using Indonesian law. So perhaps this similar discussion would occur in that case. I think I will stop there and then we can continue with discussion. Thank you so much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Give a round of applause to Bapak Iman Prihandono SH LLM PhD. Wow, what a wonderful and interesting case, Bapak Iman Prihandono. So this is your recent research, yeah. Okay, so yes, we'll enter the question and answer session for this second speaker. So we will have 2 or 3 terms. Yeah, we'll divide this question and answer session to 2 or 3 terms, and then each terms will be consist of 2 participants. So we are entering the first term of this question and answer session. For the participants, please raise your hands. Okay, we have the first questions. We have the first questions and then we have the second questions. The first question and the second questions. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, the first, you can introduce yourself and then the institutions and then directly the questions, please.
Okay, thank you for the chances, Pak Dias. My name is Aditya Agung Pratama and I'm at the International Law in the Faculty of Law of Universitas Diponegoro. My question will be regarding about the fair share approach or the principle that is brought in the presentation. Is there any criteria that we can use to determine this fair share between the company, or are we just let's say put the same leverage between all of the company, whether they have a small emission or big emissions regarding their fair shares towards the climate change litigation? That would be my question. Thank you very much.
Okay, so that is the first question, and then the second questions, please, Prof. Salawati. The name and the institutions.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Dr. Salawati. I'm from National University of Malaysia. Very interesting, Prof, because we in Malaysia, we're not going to influence the British courts because we already have the Limitation Acts. So after 1984, Malaysia cannot bring a Malaysian case to any of Commonwealth country. But it's very interesting to see that how the basically Dutch law and then adopted by Indonesia and can be used until today to Swiss court. Can you explain to me that how the, and I saw that in your presentation, there's unwritten law some more, which is more on customary international law. I want to know that how brave or how makes Indonesian fishermen have the courage to bring that using that Indonesian law, which I think that must be something in an international law, customary international law especially, that makes them brave enough to embrace this case. Thank you.
Another one? Yeah, please.
So thank you, Pak Iman, for the great presentations. My name is Fahri. I'm from School of Law and International Studies, Universitas Prasetya Mulia. So a bit of an update that I actually met the lawyer that representing fishermen in Pulau Pari when I was in a conference. And they helped by WALHI in Indonesia and then ECCHR, an NGO in Berlin in Germany. So yes, there was, and then we talked a lot about the case, and then I think a couple of weeks ago, she informed me in an email that finally the Switzerland court decided to use Swiss law to decide the case. So, but yes, indeed, there was a discussions on conflict of laws and international private law, whether they were going to use Switzerland law or maybe Indonesian law because of the parties are from Indonesia. But it is an interesting case for us, for academics, and just to see how the development is going to be, where, because of, even though the judgment going to be based on Switzerland law, but the effect probably could also be, impacted the fishermen in Pari Island. But thank you for bringing up the case, because it's very far from where we live in Jakarta. It's very near. So yeah, and my questions will be, because this is the thing that also I talked with the lawyer from ECCHR, that even though we look and we base our arguments based on the Royal Dutch case, which base our arguments on duty of care, but whether our judges or our judiciary systems ready to accept that progressive way, quote unquote, thinking? Because if we look at your presentations, and I agree as well, that we have Mandalawangi case and some cases that the judges use progressive mechanism or progressive way of thinking in interpreting environmental law, but there are also tons of cases where the judges in civil court were like, okay, do you have the evidence to support or not? Where is the money compensation? Where is the evidence? If you don't have it, so just normatively speaking, they don't want to take that route to be progressive, especially in environmental law cases. So what do you think the future will be? Are we now ready to be that progressive in terms of interpreting the environmental law, especially in our judiciary systems? Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you for the questions, Pak Mas Aditya, Prof. Salawati, and Pak Fahri. It's all a difficult question to answer. Okay, Mas Aditya first. Is there any criteria that the fair share approach can be implemented? Yes, the Dutch court, when deciding the Royal Dutch Shell case, does not using any complicated arguments. The fair share approach is reached, is satisfied only or merely because there's a fact, there's a scientific evidence showing that Royal Dutch Shell as a company has contributed to the carbon emission, and that's it. So causality or nexus, sebab akibat in bahasa Indonesia, is simple. Because you have contributed, the Shell company have argued, put forward some arguments, including that their contribution is less than 1%. The scientific evidence showing that their contribution is less than 1% to the carbon emission from their total operation in the world. How many fossil fuels they are selling, gasoline and etc. Less than 1%. But the Dutch, in establishing causality, taken a simple approach. Just because, only because, merely because you are emitting carbon, that's enough. So that's what fair share approach is, Mas Aditya. Prof. Salawati, your question has been answered by Mas Fahri, Pak Fahri. So I haven't updated. Thank you for the update, Pak Fahri, that the court in Swiss has finally decided to use Swiss law. I was involved in the early stage of this case when they are going to file the case to Swiss court. The lawyers from WALHI and ECCHR in Munich or Berlin perhaps, yeah, they've contacted me and seeking my opinion on that. Because in fact, the Pulau Pari case was not the first case where Indonesian civil court is used in the foreign jurisdiction. There's one case on against ExxonMobil Oil brought by 11 farmers in Aceh. The case was also using Indonesian Civil Code 1365. But unfortunately, last month, they have entered into settlement. So the court have not been able to trial the case using 1365. I was very eager to know the result. And in that case, the lawyer also have contacted me in the early stage of the case before the case was filed in the Washington DC court regarding whether 1365, 1365 BW can be used against ExxonMobil Oil in the US court. Fortunately, they have entered into settlement. So, Professor Salawati, there is what we call as funded litigation. Yeah, the same with the case where fishermen in Pulau Rote bring case against Australian companies who have polluting the water of Pulau Rote because of the blowout in the drilling operation just off coast of Darwin. So there's funded litigation. So there are people with money, abundant money who invest in certain tort litigation. So in Australia, fishermen brought class action and they won the case for compensation. So I think the sponsors are happy with that. The same with the case against ExxonMobil Oil. It was funded also. But I'm not sure in the Swiss case because it was represented by an NGO in Germany. And Pak Fahri, what the future will be, we all hope for the best. We all hope for the best. Thank you so much, Pak Fahri, Bu Prof. Salawati, and Mas Aditya.
Okay, thank you for the first term of the question and answer session. Now I will open the second term of the question and answer session. You can raise your hand and then you can ask directly to Pak Iman. Yeah, we have the first participant and then the second.
Check. Okay, good morning. My name is Joshua. I'm from Bandung. My question is, do you think national approach from a state has an impact to the climate change litigation? Because you brought the Royal Dutch Shell versus Milieu Defensie. And if we are talking about a Royal Dutch Shell versus Milieu Defensie, it's kind of two sides of coin with Urgenda, because they have the same lawyer. Because the Netherlands base their policy for combating climate change as absolute basis, but in Indonesia or mostly in Southeast Asia countries, they still use business as usual approach. And the second one, I would like to quote from Osowski and Peel, because they mention about the criteria for climate change litigation. The first one is climate change as the main issue. The second one is climate change as peripheral issue. And the third is climate change is not the issue, but as one of the motivation. And the last one is the climate change has impact to the case itself. My question is, for the second question, which one from your presentation should fit from the four categories? Thank you.
Second question, if any. The second questions? Okay, you can answer the first question first, Pak Iman.
Thank you so much, our colleagues from Bandung. We are still using business as usual. Will it be a case against companies in Indonesia similar with the case in Royal Dutch Shell in the Netherlands court? I'm not sure also, but at least we can take a good lesson learned from the case, because we share similar we share similar rule on rehmatic debt. So perhaps if maybe NGOs in Indonesia thinks that it is time to bring certain companies to court and to perhaps to establish new standard in Indonesia about the obligation of private entities such as companies, so that they will not be using business as usual anymore. So the RDS case will be good as a lesson learned. Secondly, climate litigation. In fact, climate litigation is not new for us. There have been a number of cases against companies in forest fire violation, haze problems, haze issues. Unfortunately, government or Kementerian Lingkungan Hidup, the environmental ministry, it was only the environment ministry that have been working hard to sue, to bring claims, to bring case against this company. And unfortunately, also, the compensation has not been paid until today. So climate litigation is not new for us. It's just because what we have seen now, government has been the first, have been the most entity who brought a case against companies. But mostly in haze, forest fire. But perhaps sometimes we also need to try to sue based on the carbon emission, just like Royal Dutch Shell case. I don't know. Perhaps, maybe someday, somehow, we will see the same case in the future. Terima kasih.
Okay, so another question from the participants. If you have any questions, you can raise your hand and then ask directly to Pak Iman. Another questions maybe for the second presenter? Okay, so if there is no question, I guess that will be the end of this second speaker for the third plenary session of the International Conference of Law, Economics and Government. Thank you for joining us today, and then thank you for Pak Iman Prihandono SHLLM PhD as the speaker. However, before we close this plenary session, do you have a closing statement, Pak Iman?
My closing statement will be we need progressive judges and also progressive academia to prevent, to stop climate change, perhaps to bring claims against companies to stop, to reduce emission. I think that's my closing. Oh, and for those who are interested to read my work in progress article, then you can, I will give it to Ibu Anggita perhaps, but it is a work in progress research, so it might not be able for you to be cited. It cannot be cited and cannot be produced further. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you Pak Iman for the interesting topics and the wonderful presentation today. Yeah, so as he said that if you're interested to read his recent research, you can contact him or contact Ibu Anggita for the further information. And then I guess this will be the end of this third plenary session. I would like to say thank you to all the participants, to all the stakeholders, to all the speakers that are able to share their thought, to share their paper, their research in this prestigious forum. Thank you once again to the rector, to the dean, and all the leader of the Universitas Diponegoro for supporting this program. And then thank you Pak Iman once again for joining us today on the third ICOLEG. Apologize from me if there is any mistakes when leading this discussion. Thank you. See you on the next International Conference on Law, Economics and Government. Thank you. Back to you, Efrema. Give a round of applause to Pak Iman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Diasama, for conducting the discussion today. And thank you as well to our speaker. It was a very insightful session. And also, now we are going to have a short 30-minute break up until 11:30, and we will be back for the announcement for best presenter and best paper as well. So see you all at 11:30. Thank you very much.
excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, if you have any need to signature of the official travel order or SPPD, official travel order, you can bring your SPPD or official travel order to the registrations desk in front of this room. Thank you very much. Bapak dan Ibu yang terhormat, apabila Bapak Ibu membutuhkan tanda tangan untuk SPPD, silahkan untuk membawa SPPD Bapak Ibu ke meja registrasi. Terima kasih.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the closing ceremony of the Third International Conference on Law, Economic, and Governance 2023. We have reached the very end of the conference today. However, before we end, first and foremost, we have a session in giving a token of appreciation by the Vice Dean of Faculty of Law, Universitas Diponegoro, Dr. Trilaksmi Indreswari, SHMH, to our speaker today, Pak Imam Prihandono, SHMH LLM PhD. To our Vice Dean, Dr. Trilaksmi, and our speaker today, Pak Imam Prihandono, you may approach the front. A round of applause to our speaker today. Thank you very much to our Vice Dean, and thank you very much to Pa Imam as well. And next, we have an announcement for the best paper and the best presenter for each chamber, which will be announced by the chairperson of ICOLEG 2023, Dr. Muhammad Afif Mahfud SHMH. To Dr. Afif, the time and place is yours.
Okay, right now I will announce the best paper and the best presenters in the third international conference on law, economic, and governance. The best paper in the third international conference on law, economic, and governance, attained by Dewego Tadeus, Pisa Vitus Wilhelmus, and Joseph Jacob Latuan. With the title of the paper, Community Participations in the Management of Kelimutu National Park, Ende Flores. This is the lecturer of Universitas Nusa Cendana in East Nusa Tenggara. Okay? Because the author has not come in this room, this will be represented by one of the committee. Bagus Rahmanda, please take the place to change Mr. Dewego Tadeus and team. And the best presenters in this conference are Fahri Hasani Habib, and the second will be Muhammad Zaki Ramadan Al-Rizal. And the last best presenters is Tria Noviantika. Please have your place. Okay, those are the announcements, and the certificates will be given by our Dean, Profesor Retno Saraswati, SH Hum.
And another round of applause for our best paper and presenter today. Thank you very much, Dr. Afif, for presenting the awards. And now, congratulations as well to the best presenter and best paper. And now we have reached the very end of our event today and the very last event for the ICOLEG 2023. We hope that this event has been very insightful and blissful for everyone. I definitely enjoyed every bit of it and seeing every one of you here. It has been a pleasure to be a host for the event. And on behalf of all the committees, I would like to apologize if there has been a mistake throughout the event. And thank you to all the participants, attendees. We hope to see you all again in our next ICOLEG. Thank you very much. And lastly, we have a quick photo session with the Dean. And my apologies. Lastly, we have a closing speech from our Dean of Faculty of Law, Universitas Diponegoro, to Professor Retno Saraswati, SH Hum. The time and place is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. The Honorable Rector of Universitas Diponegoro, Profesor Dr. Yos Johan Utama SH Hum. The Honorable Speakers, Profesor Dr. Petra Minerop, Profesor Dr. F.Ik Aji Samekto SH Hum, Profesor M.R. Andri Gunawan WSH LLM PhD, Associate Professor Dr. Salawati Matbasir LLB LLM, Dr. Dahliana Hasan SH Tech, Imam Prihandono SHMH LLM PhD, Dr. Konstantinus Yaloridies LLB LLM, distinguished guests and participants. We have come to the conclusion of the third international conference of law on law, economic and governance, or ICOLEG 2023. Over the past 2 days, we have indeed in fruitful discussion that have enriched our understanding of the main theme, progressive law in the midst of climate justice. The keynote session delivered by our esteemed speakers have been enlightening and the scientific session in each parallel chamber have provided us with thought-provoking discussions. I would like to express my utmost respect and sincere gratitude to all the speakers, presenters, and participants who have graced this conference with their presence. On behalf of the organizing committee, I extend our sincere apologies for any inconvenience that may have occurred during this event. We are immensely grateful for the support we have received from Universitas Diponegoro and all the individuals involved in making this conference possible. Our heartfelt appreciation goes to the entire organizing committee and the hardworking crew members who have dedicated their tireless efforts to ensure the success of the international conference. Thank you for orchestrating such a remarkable event. Ladies and gentlemen, we sincerely hope that you are keeping well and safe. We eagerly anticipate a reconvening at the next ICOLEG, where we will delve into another captivating topic encompassing law, economic, and governance. Thank you all very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much to Prof. Ratno for the closing remarks. And now we have finally reached the very last end of the event for today. And I would say thank you for all the participants and attendees who have attended the entire International Conference on Law, Economic, and Governance 2023. We hope to see you all again next year. Thank you very much. And a photo session would also be conducted in the front. So thank you very much. So if all the participants could come forward for the photo session, and as well as with the committee as well. Pada seluruh hadirin untuk dapat maju ke depan untuk sesi foto bersama panitia. To all attendees, committees, if we could all come forward. I would like to inform all participants that lunch is available in the right side of the hall. So if we can all approach the right side for lunch, and for VIP will be located on the left side of the room. Thank you very much.